Polling data is out. The summer has been slow, though, politically.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
All right, welcome in. Nice to have you on this Thursday evening in the summer, first week of August. Enjoy August. Do not fret that the summer is over. A lot of people say, oh, it's August already. Stop it. Enjoy it. What are you going to do? The world turns, the calendar moves, and August is kind of a fun time. You don't have to have a back-to-school mentality quite yet, but, you know, you get a kind of a back-to-school mentality for the political races right after Labor Day as a constituent, and that's a problem for candidates who are trying to get some traction in the middle of the summer. There's nobody better to kind of take a look at the current status of elections here than Joe Fleming, our pollster, and we'll talk to Joe in just a moment. So thanks for tuning in. Let's take a look at the latest in Washington, though. I'm sure Joe has a thought on this as well. Trump Sessions eruption hits a concern over direction of Mueller probe. I am still completely perplexed as to what this president thinks he was doing when he tweeted that Jeff Sessions ought to end the witch hunt. Jeff Sessions is not in a position to end the investigation. He has recused himself. I mean, I'm beginning to think that the president is now off his rocker. And is someone going to ask the question, is he off his rocker, rather than just opining from Twitter? And we have other headlines as well, you know, regarding this. I mean, they're all, I mean, it was the 24-hour news cycle yesterday. Here's the latest from CBS.
President Trump's legal team is trying to work out the parameters for the president to sit down for an interview with special counsel Robert Mueller.
He's always been interested in testifying. It's us, meaning the team of lawyers, including me, that have the most reservations about that.
The New York Times is reporting President Trump is pushing his lawyers to reach an agreement against their wishes so that he can testify. The Times says Mueller's team is standing firm on the topics of discussion, including possible coordination between Mr. Trump's associates and Russia, and whether the president tried to obstruct the investigation. But Mueller's team did agree to accept some answers in writing, while preserving the right to ask follow-up questions in person.
They sent us a proposal. We responded to their proposal. They took about 10 days, and yesterday we got a letter back from them. And now we're in the process of responding to their proposal.
The Times says the president believes he can convince the investigators for the special counsel, Robert S. Mueller III, of his belief that their own inquiry is a witch hunt. President Trump has been adamant in his position that the Mueller probe is a witch hunt, and he repeated it again Wednesday. He tweeted, Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now. Some Republicans on Capitol Hill disagree.
I think it's inappropriate for him to be commenting on an ongoing investigation.
I think Mueller should finish his work, and the truth is what is going to be good for the president and good for the country.
The White House insists the president is stating an opinion on the investigation, not issuing an order.
Do you think Marco Rubio believes what he says in terms of the investigation being good for the president and good for the country?
I'm really not sure, Dan. I mean, Marco Rubio says a lot of things, but I think he believes the probe should continue on. At least that part I do believe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he believes the probe ought to continue on because this nicey game he's been playing with the president is all a facade anyway.
Well, I think with a lot of Republicans it could be. They're just afraid to go against Donald Trump right now because what could happen in a Republican primary. We've seen that in other primaries where Trump supporters win the primaries. Doesn't mean they're going to win the general election, but in the primary, Donald Trump is very strong, and they're afraid to be run against by another Republican.
So, welcome, Joe. Good to see you. You know, it's. I'd be interested in your take on the pulse of our community and America in general regarding this whole thing. I mean, if you take I think as objective a look as you can at the progress of this story, it is heating up in a huge way.
Right.
Between Paul Manafort having his own trial, not Trump related, wink wink, the case has nothing to do with the president because it's all preliminary to his relationship with the president. But let's not kid ourselves about what may go on here. That's going on. Now this negotiation for them to get together is going on. He's acting out in a way that is, even for him, up here.
Yep.
What do you think, though, that America is thinking about all of this?
After a year and a half, I really believe that voters now look at it and say, it's Donald Trump being Donald Trump. This is what we're expecting out of this president. If you love Donald Trump, you're right there with him. If you don't like Donald Trump, no matter what he says, is going to be negative. And I think the voters are accustomed to that now. When something new breaks, oh, well, here we go again. In 2 days, something else is going to happen. Donald Trump's going to change the topic. And we've seen that for the last year and a half. Started on Inauguration Day with the size of the crowd, something simple as that.
Right.
In this Russian probe, by him always saying that it's a witch hunt, his supporters get firmer and firmer believing that. And in turn, they become entrenched. And the voters are really getting divided in this country.
Have you ever seen, you know, just as a pollster and a student of politics, have you ever seen such a trance that constituents who are in the Trump camp or the Trump base seem to have for this guy?
No, they are just so loyal to him, his base. I mean, I think back to the early 70s when I was fairly young with Nixon and the Watergate. I mean, he had his strong supporters, but as time went on, they left him. And he was at the end with very little support in the country. Where Donald Trump's support is staying with him. I've seen poll numbers where his job rating is inching up slightly. I think part of that's because of the economy. But I also see with the numbers moving up, Trump's looking at this saying, hey, I'm going in the right direction.
Because he's playing in the social media playing field, and I don't know. I just don't know what his mission is. What's his mission? What is the people's reaction to his mission? And what is leadership's reaction to his mission?
Well,
I mean, no other president. This isn't about disruption and change agency. This is off the charts behavior, which is clearly dangerous for the country.
We've never seen this with a president before, this type of presidency, especially using social media as much as he is. But he controls the Congress, and both the leadership of the House and Senate, they want to be very careful. They don't want to offend him, so they're going along with him on a lot of things. But again, there's going to come a breaking point where people will finally say, maybe we've had enough of Donald Trump, and that what he's doing is not right for the country.
But what could the breaking point be, other than, I don't know what his behavior would produce as a breaking point. And the Mueller probe, if and when it becomes public, right, he has strategically pre-poisoned the well for the report, so much so that there's a group of people out there that don't believe anything genuine will come out of it.
Totally agree with you. And I said those are the real die-hard Trump supporters. But if the Mueller probe comes up with something and there is indictments, I think that's when you're going to see the tide turning. Donald Trump has really been Teflon. Think back to the primaries, the mistakes he made, like when he criticized John McCain for being a prisoner of war. You would think his campaign was in big trouble then, yet he just kept on growing and growing. It seems that no matter what he does, what we think might be a mistake, enough of voters like what he's doing. The big question is going to be in 2020, can he get reelected? Especially in those swing states where he just swung by, if those people are now going the other way.
Well, isn't 2020 dependent on 2018 and what happens here in the midterms?
It will have a big dependency on that, there's no question. But again, those states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, where he won by a total of 100,000 votes in those three states. I mean, that no matter what happens in 2018, those could be the key states, and they could go the other way very easily because they've been Democratic in the past. But again, who do the Democrats run? If they run somebody too liberal, it's going to come back and haunt them.
Yeah, the progressive Bernie Sanders model seems to be very popular within the Democratic Party, but it's not going to be very popular across the board.
Dan, I agree. It's very popular in the primaries. But in the general election, you need those independent middle-class voters. Think back to 1992, Bill Clinton. He played himself right down the middle of the road, and a lot of the progressives at that time were too happy with him running, but he went right down the middle and grabbed those moderates. And that's how the Democrats won in '92. That was a big plus for him, staying in the middle.
Well, some of that dynamic actually impacts our local races, and we'll talk about that when we come back. So the governor has spent a boatload of money already comparative to what everybody else has. Of course, it's the dead of the summer. There's her beer commercial. You know, where she says, "Oh, we got so much to do, but still, you know, a lot left there, whatever." The production value, Joe, is very, very, very high. I think she looks completely out of place trying to be. She has a very hard time. For her, it seems like it's acting to be casual, normal, middle class. I mean, she's not an abnormal person. You know, one-on-one, she's pretty easy.
Yep.
But she has a problem, and they can't seem to. They can't seem to make her normal. You know, but regardless of my opinion on the ad, it's very high production level, no doubt about that, and she's got a boatload of dough.
Right.
Is it like $7 or $8 million she's going to spend if she gets through a primary to move the needle like 3 points?
That's probably all she would have to move the needle from her last election.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. But keep in mind, Dan, there's been 3 polls: the WPRI Roger Williams poll, the Go Local poll, and the Morning Consult, all have her job rating fairly low. Morning Consult had it the highest at 44. We had it in the 30s, and so did Go Local. So I think she believes she has to go up early to try and reinforce to the voters on what she has done and the type of job she believes she has done for the state of Rhode Island. And I think that's why she's going early. As you said, she has a boatload of money. She's probably spent more on advertising in these past 2 months than some candidates will spend in the whole campaign.
Right.
The question is, it's the middle of the summer. How many people are watching? What's the saturation? And what impact has it had with these ads?
Well, as a pollster, you probably have been asked this question behind the scenes a whole bunch of ways. She is, because she's the incumbent.
Right.
She has a high recognition level.
Correct.
People have already formulated opinions on her, and so her shimmy in the low 40s is either a high 30, you know, maybe capping to 44, 45.
Right.
And all of this is, you know, she gets to 44, 45.
Right.
She probably gets reelected. Probably.
Probably with that number, yes.
Right. But I am told by players, you know, in and around her sphere, that Raimondo team is worried, that they are worried about their negative numbers. They are worried about not connecting.
Well, the polling we've had, when you ask about job ratings for her, she's always like in the low 30s on her poor job rating. You're not going to move those voters at all. So she's trying to move those voters and say she's doing a fair job or a good job, move them more forward. So I think they're concerned that it's going to be very, very difficult to move her numbers forward because people are setting their opinions of her. They either like her or they don't like her, and there's not that many people in the middle. So she has to really move that needle 3 or 4 points.
Remind me, is there any, after 4 years, don't most elected officials have a like-dislike lock that has a very short variable, or is she unique?
No, there are some who have low, you ask the poor rating, that's usually 10, 15% for some people. Governors could be a little bit higher, depending on what's going on in the state of Rhode Island. I think she has a couple of problems because of the unions in the past. You have public employees who are set in their ways with her, so that brings her negative number up, I believe. But I think she is set in most of her vote. And there's probably a small number of voters that they're trying to move, they're trying to target on. And it could also come down, believe it or not, to turnout come November. If the turnout's high in the Democratic areas, that's going to be a big plus for her, like Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls.
Well, let's stay with the primary. Is she? I'm told that that there's a bunch of birdies on the street telling me right now that labor that wants to see her win the primary are going to be spending some dough with giving Spencer Dickinson, who's not even on our chart here. Did you put him on our list? No. Yes, you did. He's got like 10 grand in his campaign or whatever. There's a list of candidates that obviously we're running it on who's got on a financial total as opposed to primary left and right. But Fung is a general election candidate, a Republican. Morgan's a Republican running against Fung in the primary. Trillo is an independent that'll be there at the end if he wants to be. Brown, though, at $41,000 versus Raimondo's $3.9 million. So take Brown and Dickinson are in the primary against Raimondo. Sorry to put that in that order, but it is a chronological cash order versus a primary deal. So reportedly, the unions want to juice up Dickinson a little bit to kind of pull Brown down a little bit to try to help Raimondo win this thing. Smart play?
Well, I think it could be because if they can, Dickinson is more of a liberal, progressive, and if they can move progressive votes that way, they're not going to go to the governor at this point. That would help the governor.
She just put out a pretty progressive play.
Right. I think she's trying to get some of those progressive votes from Matt Brown. I'm sure they've done extensive polling. They know what they got to say to get those votes. She has to be very careful, though. She doesn't go too far to the left, because that can come back and haunt you in the general election. We saw that with Alan Fung 4 years ago. He went too far to the right with the right to work legislation, and that hurt him with all the unions, where he could have had some possible support. So I think this campaign, we see an Alan staying towards the middle. The governor's going to the left, but she doesn't want to go too far to the left. But I think she really believes she needs to win the primary comfortably. Because let's say it's a close primary. That's going to give an impression she's in trouble in the general election, big time. And the Republicans are going to use that, saying it's a divided Democratic Party. So I really believe the Raimondo camp believes they need to win the primary and win the primary convincingly.
So on the Republican side, Patricia Morgan, the state rep, puts out her own poll data. You did a story on this yesterday.
Yep.
She thinks she's, with likely voters, she's within the margin of error, she says.
Well,
she says she's 4 points down with likely primary voters. That's what she just put out in an email.
Okay, the numbers I saw yesterday from Tim White was 44 to 33 was the number that Tim White had, and he told me he saw the complete poll that Patty Morgan had. So I'm just going by what I was given yesterday.
Yeah, well, she's saying, I read it. Anyway, what do you think the real story is? And I'll grab this right off my thing.
Yep.
What do you think the real story is on that Republican primary?
Well, first thing to keep in mind, polling Republican primaries in Rhode Island, I believe, is very difficult. Can it be done? Yes, it can. It takes a lot of phone calls because you don't know what size of primary you're going to get. Are you going to get a 15,000, 20,000 turnout, which is basically all Republicans, or are you going to get the 50,000 or 60,000 turnout, which brings a lot of independents in? So I don't know the makeup of her poll, what percent were independents, 1% were Republicans. But she's saying she's 11 points down. Alan Fung has a poll, which I have not seen the complete poll, saying he's up by like 40-some points.
According to her poll, which WPRI reported on last night, Patricia Morgan is behind only 4 points amongst the most likely primary voters, she asserts.
Okay. Again, both polls were done for each campaign.
Right.
So, I mean, you got the tale of two polls here. Which one's right, we don't know, because there's been no independent polls on this race.
And you've always had a hard time polling the Republicans.
Yes. I'm very reluctant to poll Republicans around because of what I just said. You don't know what the turnout's going to be. You've got to get the right mixture of Republicans, the right mixture of independents. I think back to years ago when Ron Makeley and Lincoln Armand was running. And Ron Makeley, I remember talking to somebody. They had their polling that showed them okay. The problem is their poll was among past Republican primary voters. Lincoln Armand increased the turnout to bring a lot of independents in and won the election. So Republican primaries are very difficult to poll. Both polls could be correct in their own minds, but again, I don't know what the makeup is in the breakdown of the demographics.
And finishing off on the governor's race, Joe Trillo is he's got sign controversies and running his boat in it, but his name has been out there, and it's not like he's molested a kid or anything. I mean, what my point is that the news hasn't been so bad, and he's had a pretty combative disposition with it. He's got some no-charge name recognition that's been up.
Dan, you're 100% correct. In the last Channel 12 poll, I can't remember, it was like 60 or 70% of the people did not know Joe Trillo. I'm sure based on these two incidents as it happened, that number has dropped dramatically. Now he's getting better known. So the question is, after the primary, can he go out there and put some meat on the bones besides knowing the name? He's
sacrificing some goodwill in Narragansett with the sign controversy down there. At the same time, he's trading that for recognition.
And that's what he needs.
When does he become viable? At 17, 18, 19%?
If he gets up to 17, 18, 20%, he's definitely viable. He's going to have a major impact on the race.
Viable as a spoiler or viable as a winner?
I would think at this point probably as a spoiler.
So then we have to examine what we mean together as viable.
He's going to be a factor in the race. There's a possibility when you get like that, if you can get up to 18, 20%, you might catch fire and move on. We saw that when Capriel, Chafee, and Robitaille was running. Capriel had the big lead. Robitaille was down in the teens. At the end, he came right up there.
Right.
So you never know. The voters' opinions could change depending on what happens in the campaign.
So if he gets to the low 20s, he's a potential contender. He's not going to get out of the race.
No.
Which Alan Fung is, and it just absolutely demoralizes or it really creates a ceiling for Alan Fung.
I totally agree. If Joe Trillo gets a 20%, that means he's grabbing Republican and independent votes. He's not grabbing Democratic votes. The governor's vote total is not going to move much at all downwards. But Alan Fung's, I believe, could move down considerably as Joe Trillo goes up.
Yeah, it's like a kamikaze mission if you're somebody who thinks that Gina Raimondo shouldn't be reelected. The U.S. Senate race when we come back. You know, we're talking governor. There's Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee. He's got his own primary race. You know, all indications are that he's got a pretty comfortable lead over Aaron Regenberg right now, but it's not the kind of thing he can take for granted, correct?
Dan, I agree. I don't think either one of these candidates are well known to the voters of Rhode Island at this point. And this is a race where turnout is going to have a big impact on it. A small turnout, I think Aaron benefits because the progressives will be out there voting, and the public sector unions who do not like Dan McKee will be out there voting. I think if the turnout gets larger, that's going to benefit Dan McKee because you have the more moderate people and conservative Democrats coming out to vote. But I don't think either one of these two candidates at this point are well known with the voters of the state of Rhode Island.
Aaron Regenberg is the state representative, kind of a you know, ad hoc leader of the progressive movement here in the state, and we have a picture of him, I think, in the State House. Well, there's the State House. I don't know if we have Regenberg in there, but out of fairness, he's coming. There he is. And I think he's going to load up a whole bunch of ammunition against McKee, not a lot of which is going to be true. It's going to be a lot of throwing it against the wall, hope it sticks.
Well, looking at the finances, he has a lot more money than Dan McKee at this point. I expect both of them to be coming up on TV with the next couple weeks to start to get himself better known. I think Aaron has to first define who he is before you throw the stuff at Dan McKee. I don't think he's done that yet.
Well, McKee just should play the, if someone has to lead, who would you want game here?
I would assume that's the way Dan McKee is going to go.
Right. Meaning, you know, if someone's got to step up and be governor, do you want this kid or do you want me? You know, hopefully we get these two guys here before the primary to talk to each other about this. The Senate race is the other
very quiet.
Sheldon Whitehouse made a very unique announcement last week with David Cicilline. No more PAC money, because now it doesn't feel good to him. But he's not giving. That was so cocky. It's almost as if he doesn't even respect that Flanders is in the race. And Flanders, I think, would be a great senator, but there just doesn't seem to be any mojo.
The race is very quiet. Flanders has not raised a ton of money at this point, where Sheldon has millions of dollars. So he's a big advantage there. I'm sure he has polling data that shows him fairly well ahead. The other thing to keep in mind is simply, if I'm the Republicans and I'm trying to hold on to the U.S. Senate, I'm looking at states where I think my Republican candidates have the best chance to win. Rhode Island isn't in that situation right now. So you're not going to get outside money coming in to help Bob Flanders, which makes it even more difficult for Bob Flanders. Where if they had outside money coming in thinking it was a race they could win, that would give him a better chance. But without that outside money, he's going to have a big disadvantage. Sheldon's going to have a big advantage money-wise.
Well, Flanders is a blue chip, capable person. But so far, it's not a blue chip campaign. But who knows? These days, who knows?
And the other thing to keep in mind is how well known is he at this point? The players know him, we know him, but is he well known with the general public? I don't think so. He has to get known first.
All right, Joe. Appreciate the thoughts. It's always a fast-moving conversation with Joe Fleming. When we come back, we'll tell you what's tomorrow night. Stay with us. Turbulence with Facebook this week. Some admission that there's been some problems again, perhaps the Russians meddling with the platform. What is the total, you know, prognostication, the future for Facebook? And how is this whole thing ever going to be, you know, figured out and kept secure? We have an expert on that tomorrow night here on Dan Yorke's State of Mind. See you on the radio at 3 on WPRO. Thanks for watching. Good night.